All right. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to the Air Sensors International Conference virtual series for 2021. This first training is Air Sensing in Cities. This event is hosted by UC Davis Air Quality Research Center and myself, Sandra Hall, the conference manager. Today's training will be moderated by Tim Dye of TD Environmental. We also have sponsorship from Clarity Movement Co. So thank you to their sponsorship. As you guys are doing a wonderful job here introducing yourself in the chat, please continue to do so. Just a reminder that when you introduce yourself into the chat, if you can do it to all panelists and attendees, that would be greatly appreciated. A little light housekeeping before we get started. All attendees will be in listen-only mode. If you have problems during the webinar, please use that chat function and send a message to myself, and I will try to help you solve any problems that you have. If you have a question for the presenter, we're going to have you also type it into the chat box there. During the Q&A portion, Tim will be sharing your questions with the presenter for answers at the very end of all the presentations. There's a little graphic there if you want to know how to share, introduce yourself and share your questions with all panelists and attendees rather than just all panelists. Just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. So after the training has completed, we will send out that recording to you to review, share with your colleagues, or watch a second time if you need to. And without further ado, I would like to introduce the moderator, Tim Dye from TD Environmental. Tim, thank you so much for helping us host this, and I'll let you take it away.
You betcha, it's a pleasure. So, hi, my name is Tim Dye, TD Environmental. I do advisory consulting on air sensors for a variety of clients, including cities. And what I'd like to do to kick this off is to give a little bit of introductory material, tell you what we're going to be doing over the next hour, and then we'll get to the presentations and then discussion and Q&A. First and foremost, I think it's really important. Like, cities are unique opportunities to provide information. It's a test bed where everyone can participate. And cities are really robust incubators for figuring out what works and what doesn't. And oftentimes this co-creation that happens in a city can be really magical to test things. And I think this quote kind of sums it up really well. During the course of the next 30 minutes, we're going to hear some unique opportunities and unique challenges that cities face. And I think cities face these challenges with air sensors. And there were a couple that we identified when we got together as a team and talked. One was capacity and training. Sometimes cities don't have someone that's specialized in air monitoring or air sensors or air quality in general. There are competing priorities. Do we put in the park? Do we work on the sewage treatment plant, or do we put it in air sensor network? So that's one challenge. The other is cities are in clear communication and close communication engagement with their public. And that's a really important thing that they treasure and nourish, and something that's really a challenge when it comes to air sensor data. There are also some shared challenges with other institutions like regulatory bodies or academia and so forth. A fear of using the data. There are accuracy issues with air sensor data. There are also costs about how much does this cost and how easy is it to use. All of this really provides some opportunities for air sensors. One is there are fewer regulatory constraints in cities. There's oftentimes less bureaucracy. As I mentioned before, you can test or pilot technology and do that for policy or advocacy applications. Sometimes it's very easy to connect and learn in an interactive, kind of agile way from the public and community groups about what works and what doesn't. And oftentimes we're seeing some air sensor networks being deployed. There's quicker implementation in cities. So with that, the next up, we have kind of the outline here. We'll have a sponsor video for 3 minutes from Clarity Movement. And the sponsor video is important because that helps fund Sandra's time and UC Davis to keep this organization going, which is great. Then we're going to have about 8-ish minute talks each from Zoe Chafe from C40 Cities, and then from the City and County of Denver, Michael Ogletree, and then from Lima, Peru, George Castelar. So we'll hear from them. And then if there's any kind of quick questions, we may take those and ask them some quick questions. But what we'd like to do is hold the questions till about halfway through, and then we'll have some question and answer. And I'd like to take moderator prerogative and also ask some questions as well. What are the best practices that our panelists would recommend? I want to ask them, what should sensor companies or manufacturers do to make sensors more useful for cities? And what's the most urgent thing that needs to be worked on right now? So that's kind of the way the next hour or so is going to shape up. But let me switch right now and play the sponsor video.
Hi, my name is Sean O'Hara. I'm the Director of Business Development of Clarity Movement. Since 2014, Clarity has developed and deployed our cost-effective IoT-based air quality management solution with governments, industrial partners, and community groups around the world. The Clarity solution is deployed in over 75 cities throughout more than 50 countries across 6 continents. The Clarity air quality management solution has been developed to cost-effectively supplement existing regulatory monitoring with cost-effective indicative air sensors that can help improve our end users' air quality management capacity for PM 2.5 and NO2. Our solution has been developed with an emphasis on ease of use, ease of deployment, and the lowest possible cost of ownership. Our sensing as a service business model greatly de-risks many of the technical and financial risks that users of similar distributed air monitoring solutions frequently encounter. The foundation of our air quality management solution is the Clarity Node S. Clarity Node S is entirely wireless and weatherproof. It's powered via a combination of solar and battery and connects wirelessly via cellular networks through a 3G, 4G global SIM card. This makes the deployment process effortless throughout the world. In most cases, the Clarity Node S can be fully deployed in 5 to 10 minutes using only a smartphone, the Clarity deployment tool, and basic hand tools. Once deployed, the data will start streaming instantly to the Clarity cloud, where it is securely stored and able to be accessed by our clients. It's important to note that all data collected by the Clarity node always belongs to our client. This includes both the raw data and the calibrated data. In addition to the Clarity node, the Clarity air quality management solution includes several cloud-based web apps to support your air quality management needs. The Clarity dashboard enables managers to understand the air pollution at each sensor site throughout the network. This provides rapid situational awareness, enabling managers to quickly identify trends and plan appropriate interventions. Additionally, the Clarity dashboard provides a suite of integrated tools to support your various analyses, such as time series comparisons between sites, co-location performance, and quickly identifying the most polluted sites within your network for a given time. So how is Clarity being used around the world today? Clarity is frequently used for a variety of policy analyses, emergency response, compliance-related applications, and community awareness initiatives. If you're representing a local government agency, city, school district, community group, or an industry that wants to be more responsible or more cost-effective in managing their air quality, feel free to contact us.
Okay, thank you to Clarity and to UC Davis. And what I'd like to do is begin the presentations. And first up, we're going to have Zoe from C40 Cities.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tim. I just want to confirm that you can see my presentation okay.
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. Great to see some familiar names on here, including a number of C40 city officials. So my name is Zoe Chafe. I'm the technical lead for air quality at C40 Cities. And over the next few minutes, I'm going to introduce you to C40 Cities and especially our air quality program, and then take you through a whirlwind tour of a few city examples that we've seen of how cities are using air quality monitoring equipment. So C40 Cities is a network-based organization that's primarily focused on climate change. We have 97 cities within our network, encompassing 700 million people and 25% of global GDP. So our goals are to demonstrate that it is possible to achieve science-based climate targets in the world's greatest cities, and that a zero carbon, clean air, and climate safe world can be successful and inclusive as well. The second goal is to move climate change from a peripheral issue into a central organizing principle of government. So how does air quality fit into this? At C40, we work within a few different networks within the cities and also within the organization to understand how air quality is affecting our cities and the people living within them. So the main goals that we have for our air quality work are to help cities to meet WHO air quality guidelines and also the commitments of the Paris Agreement. And we think that those things can go hand in hand. And that's a fundamental point to our work. So the first way we do that is by supporting mayoral leadership to set air quality goals and policies. We also help cities to generate air pollution and health data and to provide the information that's needed to create effective policies. And finally, we support cities in working towards solutions that both mitigate climate change and air pollution. So one of the groupings that we work with within C40 is the 37 cities that have signed the Clean Air Cities Declaration. And this declaration was launched just over a year ago. Signatory cities do 4 different things, which are outlined in the green bubbles here. I'm not going to have time to go through all of the details, but what I wanted to show you is that fundamental to signing this declaration is the commitment to establishing air quality goals and meet WHO air quality guidelines. And we think that one of the most important ways to do that is to identify the top sources of air pollution and to develop control strategies, and then use that to implement policies and programs. And we've set a deadline of 2025 for the first evidence of doing that within our signatory cities. And then finally, to track and report publicly on progress towards meeting these goals. And as you can see in the upper left of the box, in the middle, transparent citywide air quality monitoring is really an important part of that cycle. And we do see it as a cycle where as a city comes down to the bottom of the circle, they go back up and start to establish new goals. The city network that we have for air quality cities to work together is comprised of over 40 cities that have voluntarily shown interest in improving their air quality. And you can see the cities outlined here on this map. And what we do within this network is to improve air quality data and access in cities, to establish the health impacts of air pollution, and also to identify and implement local policies and programs. And we do that through peer-to-peer support and also convenings like the ones shown on the right here. So if we take a step back and think generally about what's going on with urban air quality monitoring across the many cities that I just mentioned, we basically see monitoring broken down into 2 different categories within the cities. The first would be regulatory, which is based on reference grade equipment to assess compliance, track trends, and to inform research. And then the second, more general category is what we call new technologies. So this could include low-cost sensors, mobile monitoring, and data assimilation. And I think that the second category is the really exciting one right now, especially because we think that cities often have more flexibility to apply these new technologies than other agencies or government groupings might. So what I'm going to do in the next few slides and over the next few minutes is just very briefly present 4 different case studies of how cities are using these different types of monitoring techniques. So the first one is in a project called Breathe London, and the objective of this campaign was to collect really high resolution air quality monitoring data that can be used for policy development and evaluation. They used a combination of mobile monitoring, fixed site monitors, and personal monitors. And that information coming out of the campaign is being used to inform the expansion of an ultra low emission zone in central London and to fulfill a mayoral commitment to increase local pollution monitoring. And the data that are coming out are really interesting. For example, we can see patterns around NOx emissions at schools specifically. And I should mention that there's a very large group of partners that were involved in making this a success, who are listed at the bottom there. The second project I want to highlight comes from Los Angeles, which is the Watts Rising Air Quality Monitoring Network. And this is a unique partnership between the City of Los Angeles and community groups to create a hyperlocal air quality monitoring program in a historically underserved and overburdened community. So it's using dense sensor deployments, somewhat like Breathe London, to advance community interest in hyperlocal air quality. It's using some new low to mid cost sensor technology to provide insights really at a block by block level, something that regulatory monitors are just not equipped or designed to do. And I think it's important to note for this program that it's really driven by community desire. The Watts community identified a need to deepen the city's understanding, or the community's understanding of local air quality, and the community group's feedback informed where the sensors would be placed. So this is an exciting new initiative. The third example I want to highlight is from Quezon City in the Philippines. And at C40, we're in the midst of a technical assistance program with Quezon City to help the city create a city-led air quality monitoring strategy. So we're working with Clean Air Asia to implement part of what the city committed to in the Clean Air Cities Declaration to establish a baseline of their air pollution levels. After the strategy is put together, the next step will be to deploy low-cost sensor networks to assess baseline levels and hotspots, which will then help the city to take more effective action to mitigate those sources. And the last example is Copenhagen, where they've participated in a project to map black carbon and ultrafine particle pollution to identify hotspots and sources. So this also supports the city's commitments under the Clean Air Declaration, Clean Air Cities Declaration, to electrify several modes of transport, to expand its low emission zone, and also to potentially introduce a zero emission zone. Data from this project can assist in evaluating intra-city trends, especially near vulnerable populations such as schools, daycares, and parks. And the city can then use that information it collects to inform its urban design policy. So in summary, I think we see that air quality monitoring is a foundational piece of the way that we at C40 think about city commitments to creating more better air quality and cleaner air. And with these new types of technology that we're seeing coming online now, cities have many tools available to support local action and also to assess their success in taking action. And these types of technology are being applied across C40 cities to evaluate intra-city trends, identify hotspots, and then figure out what to do about them. Important decisions in cities can be driven by data, and we see that partnerships are really important to pushing that forward, and that community engagement can both help design and then also be encouraged by participation in these air quality monitoring projects. So with that, I will say thank you, and I am looking forward to your questions after the rest of the presentations.
Okay, Zoe, thank you. I think there was one question just about cold weather. I think we'll hold that till the end because the other speakers may be able to answer that as well. We can discuss that. So next up, we have Michael Ogletree from the City and County of Denver, Colorado. Michael. Let's see, you're muted. Okay.
Sorry, some technical difficulties. I apologize. Everyone can see and hear me now? Awesome. So my name is Michael Ogletree. I'm the Air Quality Program Manager for the City and County of Denver, mostly focused on the technical aspects and implementation of our monitoring network. So I wanted to start, to talk a little bit from, a city's perspective on some of the ways cities are different. Most cities are non-regulatory in terms of, monitoring compliance for adherence to national ambient air quality standards. So that gives us a little bit of flexibility in the types of instrumentation we can put out and how we use that information to inform communities. The next is, this opportunity to engage directly with community members. Having a smaller geographical area and a closer tie to that specific community allows us to engage with them to really find something that meets their needs. If you're a state, for example, you have all of these these different regions that are very, very different in trying to address different types of problems when you have a rural community versus a more urban community. So with cities, while there are complexities, it allows for working towards a solution that meets that city's needs. And then, both presenters previously touched on this as well, but the ability to be a little bit more nimble and flexible when deploying these air monitoring networks. For cities, it's important to meet the specific needs of those communities and the different geographical complexities that come with those communities. And then I just highlighted a couple of challenges, funding, expertise, and capacity. With the advent of low-cost sensors, it helps with the funding piece. As everyone knows, regulatory instrumentation is very expensive, as well as the O&M to sustain those networks. But with some of the technology that's available currently, it is possible to build out a monitoring network. The next one's expertise. Similarly, low-cost sensors allow for not having to be super technical and figuring out calibration curves or anything like that. And you can put these sensors out in a pretty wide area, and for the most part, they're pretty plug and play. So it allows to kind of overcome some of those hurdles. And then on the capacity side, depending on how the networks are set up, it allows for the management of an air quality monitoring network with limited capacity. For example, in Denver, there's one technical person, and I manage, a network of over 45 different sensors and monitoring instrumentation. So why do we do this? This is more of a transition slide, and what I'm trying to get at here is, when you're putting out a monitoring network, it's good to start with why you're doing that and making sure you're building that in a way that really addresses that. So really figuring out what do you want to do, and will that sensor network produce what your desired outcomes? So are you trying to raise awareness? Are you looking to change or influence regulations? On the bottom left, that's a picture of Suncor. Do you want to use it as an alerting mechanism for when there's an exceptional event or some other very point source emissions release, and being able to address a community concern through that means? So really trying to figure out, as you're building your monitoring network, like, why are you building it? And focus on selection of instrumentation, as well as platforms and communication tools that meet those needs. So now I'll talk a little bit about our program here in Denver and how we built that program, and a little bit more about that. So our why, we in Denver have over 9,000 asthmatic students in our public school systems. Each of those families spends about $3,100 on asthma-related medical costs, and that amounts to over $30 million spent annually on asthma in the city and county of Denver public school system. So that was our focus, that was our why as we were building out our program now about 2.5 years ago. So really the reason is being able to meet those community concerns around air quality, find ways to mitigate exposure as well as local sources of pollution, with the end goal of improving the health of our community. So what we built was the Love My Air program, right? So the Love My Air program, like I said, was built around this why, and it was built in collaboration with communities. So as we were thinking through, okay, how do we solve this problem of communities having access to data and using that data to better inform their decision making? So we had, iterative focus groups with parents, teachers, nurses to figure out, how do we solve this problem? And what we came up with was the deployment of an air sensor network at schools, coupled with a data platform to bring in the data in one place from the entire network, as well as reference instrumentation to correct that data and make it more accurate. And then more importantly, work with those schools to come up with strategies for mitigation of pollution. don't know if you can see my pointer, but these are some of the focus groups with the parents. Here, this is like an actual dashboard that we have in place at the schools, relaying that data in real time. So those schools can take advantage of that. This is the parent group that actually works through what this dashboard looks like. Zoe mentioned buy-in from city leadership. So here, the mayor of Denver is very involved in the program, as well as the superintendent of Denver Public Schools. So this was, a couple of weeks after launch at one of our partner schools, and kind of just showing them and making sure that they're bought into the program and making sure that it would be able to be sustainable long term, and really making sure that it's meeting the needs of the city and the school communities. So here's where we are now. So we have sensors at schools. You can see some of them right here in like parking areas, or sorry, this is a playground, but here also in parking areas. So really in areas where, there is concern around exposure of kids to air pollution. So we take that data, we put it into a sensor agnostic data platform where we have long-term co-location so we can correct the data, and then we push that data out through that platform to dashboards. You can also see here, we also provide educational curriculum to kids as well as nurses. This is a nurse toolkit where we provide them with information and resources to better explain the impacts of air quality to their asthmatic population. This is what we've developed as a menu of options. So this is different mitigation strategies and guidance documents associated with them that would help implement those different programs. Things like, carpooling or, biking to school or anti-idling campaigns. We provide them with this menu of options because as we were developing the program, one thing we heard was that each school is different and they have different capacity levels and different challenges. So with this menu of options, we have very basic things that we provide them, things like sensors and dashboards and outreach material. But then there's also these different parts and components that they can pick and choose to adopt that kind of really is meant to fit their needs. And then we're releasing an app in the next week or two that is actually going to be the hub for all of this information. So if anyone wants educational curriculum, they'll have it at their fingertips. They'll be able to look at the data and be able to create alerts. And in future iterations of this app, which we'll be releasing later this year, we'll have dynamic ways of influencing behavior change. So things like, as I pull up to a school, I'll get a notification saying that, the school is running an anti-idling campaign. And then the next day, that same person will get a notification saying, hey, you got this message, what are you doing about it? So creating a feedback loop around all of our program and mitigation strategies to better inform the impact from each of those strategies so we can better address community concerns and really figure out the best way to implement the program going forward. And with that, I'll leave it to the next presenter and look forward to answering some questions.
Okay, great. Thanks, Michael. And lots of questions coming in, so keep those coming. George, you're up next. And right after George, we'll start answering some of the questions and have a discussion. So take it away, George.
Thank you very much, Tim. I'm gonna share my screen. Okay. Well, thank you again for the invitation from the UC Davis to be part of this conference. I'm George Castelar from Lima, Peru. I am an engineer, and currently I'm working in the air quality division in the Metropolitan Municipality of Lima. And today I'm gonna talk about our air quality network based on low-cost sensor in the city of Lima. But first, I'm gonna talk about some problems that the city of Lima has. And the first one is the level of pollution in the air that citizens breathe. So you can see, as you can see in this slide, the level of fine particulate matter is above the Health Organization guidelines. It's 23.7 micrograms per meter 3. So it's about 2.4 levels times higher than the WHO guidelines. So this is a huge level of pollution. And the hospital admission per year attributable to PM 2.5 city levels are more than 5,000. So the death per year attributable to PM 2.5 are above to 16,000 deaths. So the most affected people by the level of pollution here in Lima are children, women, the elderly, and also the outdoor workers as construction workers, the public cleaners, and others. Another problem is the number of stations that measure the air quality in Lima. We have 43 districts here in Lima, but only 10 of them have reference stations that evaluate the air quality. So what we propose is to strengthen, to complement the existing monitoring network using these air quality models that use local sensor technology in the city. So this technology is 50 times cheaper than a reference station. So this network is compounded in 3 stages. The first one is with an interinstitutional agreement with a startup called Kaira. This startup works with a university. So we have an agreement with them in order to loan 10 of these models, local sensors, to put it in different parts of the center of Lima. This is just a loan for 6 months. We just retired these 10 models from Lima last December. So the second stage is with the help of C40. C40 is a climate leadership group that work with us as part of a program in which we acquire 10 more models to display in the city. So these models are we are currently implementing these 10 models around Lima City in order to put in green areas, that in the green districts, that gray district that doesn't have these models. And the third stage is a financial with the IOR project. This is a financial from our municipality in order to acquire 20 more models, 10 for the place the models from the first stage, and 10 more in order to complement a second stage. So I think in April of this year, we're gonna have 30 of these models around Lima. So you can see the platform. Here you can see leaf from different colors. You can see green colors, orange colors, yellow colors, and these colors represents the level of the air quality index. So for example, if you can see a green leaf, you can be sure or you're sure that the level of pollution in the air is good, it's low, so you can be outside with children, with different people, and do your activities with no problem. So if you're interested in access this platform, you can see the link below, so you can access. What parameters we measure? We measure particulate matter, we measure gases, for example, carbon monoxide, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide. We measure ozone, and we measure hydrogen sulfide. And additionally, we measure the sound and measure meteorological parameters like humidity, temperature. We measure UV radiation and pressure. And each month, we process the information and prepare newsletters in order to evaluate how well or how bad was the air quality of the previous month. So you can access to this free information in this link in order to know more about the air quality, right? So the topic is the challenges. So one of the first challenge that our network faced is how well the sensor performs is in front of a reference station. So with the help of the Ministry of Health here in Peru, we put 10 of these sensors just in front of a reference station in order to know how well or how bad is the performance of this sensor. So currently, our national protocol of air quality prepared for the Ministry of Environment in Peru doesn't have a guideline or a procedure to evaluate the performance of our local sensors. So we here in the municipality prepare a document, a guideline for evaluating the field performance of this local sensor. And we receive different inputs from the US government, from the EPA, from the Pan American Health Organization, from the South Coast Air Quality Management District, and from different institutions. And we prepare this document and we use it to make an evaluation of this sensor. So 10 of these models are in this process with the reference station. We just finished the field part, and we are we're evaluating the results in order to know or to understand how well these sensors are. Another challenge is to prepare the people for example, the technical group that work in the municipality of Lima that are developing this network. The challenge is how prepare people in the implementing of this work, based on neither of us have a technical experience, because this is the first network here in Peru and in Latin America also. So we travel to different cities. For example, last year, just before the lockdown, we traveled to City of Mexico and Sao Paulo in Brazil in order to meet different networks from air quality and learn from them. And also another group traveled to London in order to participate in a workshop that C40 organized in 2019 and also in 2020 in the virtual session. So the final challenge that we are facing is how we prepare our air quality network to last over the years, because I don't know if this happened in different countries, but here in Peru, the local government just go 4 years. So after that, projects come and go from different institutions and representative. So we are preparing a protocol to make sure that the air quality network is gonna go over the years in order to don't change, to give sustainability to the project and ensure the continuity of the management. And the protocol is called the implementation of the network air quality monitor models in Metropolitan Lima. So this document is being prepared, right? And we know that it's gonna last several years. So this is a quick review about our air quality. We are really proud of that. We received an honorable mention in international awards, And we are also always looking for new sources of investment in order to expand our network. This is just a quick review. And yes, I think that's all. Thank you very much for your attention, and we are prepared to listen to your question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George, and Michael and Zoe. Thank you. If you can all come back online, super. We have a lot of questions here, which is great to see the enthusiasm and the questions. And so I'd like to start actually just with the first question. And, you know, I think there was concern and questions about how well these work in cold weather. And do you have any experience or any thoughts on that? So, or any challenges there? If one or two of you could take that, and then we'll go on to the next one.
I'll jump in. We have some cold weather in Denver. Yeah, certainly. So I believe the question was, how good is it? How good does it do in cold weather? And there was a specific number thrown out there, 0, but it wasn't C or F. So I'm not sure, but certainly at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, at 32 degrees C, you know, that it does well. You know, and even in lower temperatures, we haven't seen too much decline in data quality, especially when we're correcting for that difference in temperature. So I'll leave it at that. So if you can correct the data for temperature, it's useful. If not, it might be a little dicey.
Okay, great. So the next question I think is really probably for all three of you to answer. And there were a couple of questions about, you know, is the sensor data accepted by US EPA for the purpose of designating an area to the National Ambient Air Quality Standards? And then there was a question about 3 or 4 minutes ago on kind of risk estimates and NAC standards. And so I guess the question is, and Zoe, you talked a little bit about this, there's reference equipment and then there's air sensors. And how do you all see, do these mix? You know, how do we use this new technology? What do we use it for? What can't we use it for? If you all could kind of comment on that, that'd be helpful. Maybe Zoe, if you could start.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. And I think one that all of the cities that we work with are grappling with. So in many cases, the cities either don't have access to regulatory data, or they want to know more about the inner city, like intra-city trends, right? So what are the differences that they're seeing within various populations in the jurisdiction that they oversee? And so I think that what we're calling the new technologies, you know, low-cost sensors, mid-cost sensors, and others, mobile monitoring, can help to fill some really important gaps there. And obviously there's going to be interplay between the two different types of data if we see them as that. You know, the regulatory grade data are requested by certain agencies, they're used by certain agencies. Certainly they inform city policy and city understanding of their air quality. But in the absence of that data, or in places where there are localized sources that we think are influencing the health of vulnerable populations, that's where we really see a need for and a demand for these lower cost and more flexible types of sensing equipment. So we don't see it as an either or, we see it as both would be great.
Great. George or Michael, you want to expand on that maybe?
Yes, as I mentioned in my presentation, the main objective of our low-cost network is to complement, not to replace, to complement the existing air quality with reference equipment, because we know and we understand that reference stations are more accurate, are more precise than a low-cost sensor. So the main objective of our network is to promote awareness in population about the level of pollution citizens are breathing, in order to promote programs to improve air quality, not for supervision, for example, from different entities, not because it's for that you have the reference station. But for population, for different districts that don't have this station, local sensor is a good alternative. A local government can afford a local sensor because the money that a local government have is really low, and we know that a reference station is really expensive, and also the maintenance is expensive. So this is a good alternative that many districts can afford.
Okay, great. Michael, I'd like to have you maybe expand on this, but in a certain direction. One is, there was a question about NACS risk estimates and uncertainty, and how, as a city running a network, do you communicate risk or uncertainty related around these data?
Yeah, we have to be very careful when we're communicating around air sensor data to communities and exactly what that language is and what that can be used for. In our case, we've networked, sensors and reference instruments and all different kinds of instrumentation to provide, a good way to correct the sensors and provide at least some type of guidance around, like, let's say not absolute thresholds, but ranges, right? So the difference between 10 and 11 is very small, right? But the difference between 10 and 50 is a lot, right? So we can use these sensors to make decisions about these large changes in pollution to better address some of those pollution events and the health of our community. So not to try and slice the line between 10 and 11, but rather more 10 and 50. We know that, that's a big difference, and sensors can absolutely be used to inform around these types of changes.
Good. Zoe, a question for you came in about, have you seen cities move to the action phase using data that are collected by air sensors, air sensor networks? And I wonder if you could if you have an example of, like, how did the city move to action based on this data and information?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think one of the first examples that comes to mind is the Breathe London campaign. So it's been in operation for a little while. There were initial results that came out, and the project team has done a great job of putting together publicly accessible maps that show pollution levels. And what we're seeing is that the Greater London Authority and other bodies within the area in London are using this information now to influence their policy. So there's a low emission zone and now ultra low emission zone within the center of the city. And so when data started to come in from the sensors and from the project and were processed, there were some findings that then influenced the design of the new phases of that intervention, and really provided some credibility to the efforts that the government wanted to take on there. And then I think in the earlier phases, as I mentioned, we're working with Quezon City. And so there it's more about designing the air quality monitoring network, but I think we're moving to action already and seeing how the monitoring network will be used, especially for getting the resources needed to put that into place. And then the city is already thinking about how they can use that going forward. One interesting point is that, as access to green space and open space has become more important over the past year, I think some cities like Quezon City are thinking about how they can use their monitoring capacity or future monitoring capacity to understand pollution levels in places where people are really spending a lot of time outdoors, which is kind of an exciting new angle too.
Interesting, great. Also, thinking along the action side, Michael, I think there was a question about how successful have anti-idling campaigns been in Denver and who's enforcing it? You want to comment on that?
Yeah, we've had a relative long history of running anti-idling campaigns. As part of our program, we tried to measure the impact of anti-idling campaigns. And as you can imagine, it's super difficult. For us, we were out there trying to write down how many vehicles were not idling. So in terms of the effectiveness, without being able to measure that directly, I think it's been impactful. And we're going to continue to refine how we measure that impact going forward.
Okay, great. George, a question for you. came in about, have you been able to use your data for enforcement? Or do you plan to use your data for enforcement? And if you could just talk through that.
Yes. Actually, we are planning to implement the first a low emission zone here in Lima, in the center called the Mero de Pizarro. So we are gathering information about pedestrian zones. We have put in 4 of these sensors in each corner of this area, and we are currently gathering information in order to promote this low emission zone, in complementing with different projects, like for example the pick and plate restriction in vehicles. So this is a premier news, because this is just a project, but this is one of these initiatives that we are working on, and we plan to make this announcement sooner in our municipality. But yes, we are using our data for different studies. Yes, of course.
Okay, great. Sandra, just a housekeeping question. I know in the past, we've still got a lot more questions. I think the discussion's great. Can we go over a little bit, or do we need to wrap up at top of the hour? If you can let me know, that'd be great. The next question, I think, really goes to all 3 of you. And are there barriers or challenges that cities face in kind of stepping on the jurisdiction of maybe another agency? Like, how do you navigate that? Because cities aren't the only groups monitoring air quality. There's other folks as well. How do you navigate that? Maybe start with Michael and then Zoe or George.
Yeah, absolutely. For us, we absolutely don't want to step on the toes of, other regulatory agencies. We're not a regulatory agency. So we've taken the approach of more working collaboratively with our state agency, as well as, the Regional Air Quality Council, which is our, another air quality regional agency, and kind of really take a collaborative approach. There's actually a presentation that I'll be giving on February 10th around, this regional approach to air quality monitoring and collaboration. And hopefully, the outcome of that is more of a regional approach where we can all share data and not duplicate data, and work together to address some of these regional impacts of air quality.
Okay. Zoe or George, any additional?
Yeah, I can just say that I think it goes back again to being really clear about what the goals of the campaign are, and then the limitations and also the abilities of the sensor equipment that are being used. So we like to see, in the best case, that it's gap filling, right? That they're complementary aspects of the 2 different types of monitoring, but definitely there could be times when there's something that appears to the outside, to the public, to be contradictory. And I think that that's still a new area. We have a working group of cities that are interested specifically in low-cost sensors within our air quality network at C40. And so these are the type of questions we've been grappling with there, and trying to come up with some guidance around it. But I think it's really, in some ways, we're at the beginning stages of starting to see these issues come up and trying to figure out if there are best practices for addressing them across the board.
Great. Let me go to the next question, which came in from YouTube, and I want to kind of expand on it. There's a lot of people that are logged in here, all different backgrounds. We have manufacturers, we have regulators, we have public, NGOs, community groups, as well as academia. And I'd like to hear from each one of you, what's 1 or 2 things that academia could do to improve air sensor deployments, use, and action in cities?
Yes. Well, Tim, here as a metropolitan municipality, we have a metropolitan technical group in which gather representatives from each municipality in Lima, and also we gather representatives from different universities, public and private universities, and different institutions, and with universities, we have a close work in which we encourage students and members from technical groups in order to develop their work with the use of low-cost sensor. For example, last year we have a webinar in which we call different universities in order to present their works, because universities have investigation groups in which develop the use of low-cost sensors. So we call them and we ask if they can show their work. So, for example, this year we're going to work with the agrarian La Molina University in the use of 3 low-cost sensors that the country Chile is sending us in order to evaluate how the air quality affects children above from 3 to 5 years, in order to know how is the impact in the development, with the assistance of this university. So we are working close with them, and also and always with the assistance of this Metropolitan group. So we are working with them.
Right. Michael, Zoe, what can academia do that's going to make your life easier?
Yeah, we work very closely with academia on our sensor network. I mean, right now we're probably working with at least 5, if not more additional, right? I mean, the correction algorithm, for example, that we use within our network, we recently worked with CU Boulder to develop that algorithm and released a paper on that. We also, work with researchers to figure out, okay, how spatially distributed should a sensor network be? So sharing with them our data to be able to tease some of this stuff out. So I think there's many use cases for collaboration with cities on data for use by universities to solve all different kinds of problems, or work on different kinds of problems.
And I'll just add, across the board, I think, one of the challenges that we see from our partner cities is that sometimes sensors are not as easy to use as they could be. They don't play nicely with other sensors. There's issues with the data being publicly available in an easy way. And so I think just anything that academic partners can do to help us streamline that type of flow, from designing a project, thinking through the data analysis needs, thinking about how this will actually in practice work with other types of sensors that are out there in terms of co-location, and then actually being able to get that data up in a way that is publicly available. I think there are many, many points along the way where academic partners are crucial. And so we've really valued our partnerships.
Great. I'd like to kind of change the question, similar question, but let's direct it at the manufacturers. What's the one thing that's maybe frustrating that you wish I really wish you'd work on this? Like 1 or 2 things. Is there anything like that?
Open and transparent access to data. When we went down this path, there was a lot of limitations as to, even sensor manufacturers having APIs to pull data or not sharing how they're correcting their data. Open and transparent access to raw as well as process data and the methodology for which that processing is done, super useful.
Okay, great.
Just with the complementing what Michael says. For example, one of improve that the manufacturer of our low-cost sensor did was to add the option from the energy. For example, in our sensor, we use solar panels, because most of our points when in which we locate these sensors doesn't have electrical power. So we are implementing with solar energy in order to make sure that the data is monitoring 24/7 days. So this is a good improve, and also the adding a color, a LED light that change according to the air quality index. So this is a good way to not only put the data in a platform web, but put it in the sensor itself. So people that walk through the sensor see the light and know how the air quality is right? So this is a good improve for citizens.
Okay, great. Just timekeeping, we're going to go a little bit over. We can go to about 15 minutes past. Probably won't go that far, but we have some more questions, like to kind of wrap it up in the next 5 to 10 minutes or so, if that's okay with everybody. Zoe, what would you have manufacturers do?
So we have a bit of a laundry list because we work with so many different cities, but I'm going to try and encapsulate them in one answer, which is that staff time and capacity is the absolute gold #1 thing that cities are concerned about. So anything that manufacturers can do to lessen the burden on staff. And so what that means is, like George was saying, making sure that there's a good source of power that doesn't rely on electricity for a long period of time, up to a month, so that data is not lost. For cities that have high humidity, making sure that there's a way to deal with that so the sensor is not compromised. And then I think in general, just being really clear on the spec sheets about what the sensor can and cannot do. What are the capabilities and what are the limitations, so that cities don't get a surprise down the line when they try to go and calibrate or apply factors and find out that it's not actually applicable to their situation. So I know that's a lot altogether, but I think it really comes down to having cities be able to understand what their staff time will look like from the beginning of the project.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we brought up at the very beginning is training and capacity, and oftentimes there are limitations, and you don't have all the time to do that. Another question for you is a city wants to deploy a network, and they learn that you did it, and they call you up. What are the first 1 or 2 things that you tell them to kind of guide them? And this is really for you and George and Michael as well.
Yes, yes, it's a hard work. The first thing that I will say to the city that wants to deploy an air quality network, it's gonna cost you a lot. Not money necessarily, because, for example, in our case, we apply to international funds and national funds, but it requires a lot of patience, a lot of good mood, and a lot of effort, because here in Lima we have public protocols that we have to proceed in order to implement our network. And also, if you want to develop an air quality network, you have to prepare technically in order to do your own work. For example, in our case, each of the technical worker had to prepare in order to know how to implement the network. And also you have to apply or to make different convenience, different agreements with institutions, because it's a two-work way in this implementation. So you have to be patient and make alliance with different institutions in order to implement in a good way your network. Yes.
Michael?
For me, we actually built our program around replication. I didn't mention it in our presentation, but I should have. So anyone who'd be interested in talking more about what replication looks like and how to do that, we've created like a toolkit for outreach and engagement materials and strategies around some of the different methodologies. So more than happy to to talk about what that looks like in more detail. But in short, just prepare and start with why when you're building out that network, so that you can build something that meets your needs.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah, if I can just jump on that, I think that's really good advice, to think about why you're doing it. Just be super, super clear from the outset about what the goals are of the project. And then the thing I'd like to add is thinking about it as a life cycle of a project. So not just purchasing the sensors. I think sometimes cities who are just getting into this think about, well, how much are the sensors going to cost? But we encourage cities to look across the entire project, all the way to the data analysis, which can be a sticky point sometimes, and one that takes a lot of staff time and capacity building. So we have seen some cities where they get sensors, they're getting data, it's coming into the right place, but then they don't actually end up doing anything with the analysis side of it because something happens right there and it doesn't get turned into something that's meaningful and useful for policy or for people to see publicly.
George and I think Michael and Zoe, I think some of the projects that you're doing, they're funded by foundations or philanthropy or aid projects. Do you see, is this necessary to kind of get us to the point to demonstrate how useful these are? Will cities end up funding this, or will they spend the money in other ways? What's your prediction in that? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. City needs from funding to implement the air quality network. In our case, it went from C40s. C40s help us not only by the finding, but with technical support in order to implement our air quality network, and also complementing the 10 models that C40 help us to obtain. We applied to an IOR project. This is a financial by our own entity, the municipality, with the help of the Ministry of Economy. So we have to fill forms, to apply, to answer different questions to different institutions, because as we know, this is a technical project. So most of the authorities don't understand how important or how complex is an air quality network. They only see, oh, you have devices, but what do you want for, or why do you want for? You're a municipality, you don't measure air quality, you don't need it. So the challenge is to explain in a simple way how important is this, not only for the municipality, for all citizens, and that's why you need to have clear what is your goal and what are the advantages of this air quality network, right? So yes, necessarily, I think necessarily cities will need to apply to international fund or national fund. The funds are there. You just have to search and to be perseverant in the application, because maybe you don't want the first program, or maybe the second or the third, but you have to be perseverant in what you want.
Okay.
Yes.
Zoe, you work with a lot of cities. What's the sense out there? Do you think it's going to become kind of a mainstay within cities, or is this a flash in the pan?
Yes, it will become a mainstay. That's our goal. So I think what we're doing right now is trying to support cities to get off the ground, to see the value of monitoring, if they know it themselves, to demonstrate it to other policymakers and to people living within the city. And by doing pilot studies and monitoring strategies and getting small deployments out there, that builds the case for showing what sensors can do and why it's so important to understand what the air quality of the city is and what the air quality of specific neighborhoods is, right? And so I think as that value is shown, cities can then use that information to make the case for building budget line items and getting money and finance and resources dedicated to this going forward, so that it really does become an integral part of their policymaking.
Great, awesome. Let's see, all the attendees, if you're still with us, Sandra's put emails for everybody in the chat there, so you can get that and you can contact any one of the panelists or myself. Zoe, I know there were a number of questions about C40 as an organization and how do we become a city, and lots of questions like that. For those folks out there that were asking that question, I'd encourage you to contact Zoe and find out more about C40. Great organization. With that, I'd like to bring this to a close, and we could go on for another hour. There's so many questions, and perhaps we can do another sensing in the cities, if you will. So Zoe, I'd like to thank you and Michael and George, Sandra. I appreciate just the tremendous support that UC Davis is providing to keep this network and community going through obviously challenging times. I look forward to meeting everybody in 2022 when we can meet in person. And until then, I look forward to more seminars. Sandra, is there any additional things you'd like to talk about or any closeout items?
No, that's it. The recording will be shared via email in the coming day, but otherwise we hope you have a great rest of your day, and thank you again to our panelists and Tim for moderating.
Okay, great. Thanks everybody. Look forward to meeting you in 2022 and talking more about this technology. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Sandra. Great questions.
Thank you very much.
All righty.
Thank you very much. We'll see you soon.